Sorry to bother you, my but would you please perhaps have any baby fun? I guess that means no. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Welcome to the premiere episode of From Bargain Bin to Bombdiggity. In this series, we take something that we found for 50% or less, and we take that sweet, sweet nerd stuff and we try to make it just a little bit sweeter. On today's episode, we make sea people. There are so many different companies that put out so many interesting miniatures that it's hard to know much about them. So we've been slowly stockpiling miniatures from lots of various games. We love hunting for bargains. Thrift shops, half-price stores, online sales, any place that has a clearance. Today's episode, we're starting with the Hadross starter box that we picked up at a local half-price store. One thing that we have encountered with some of these different miniature types, that they have so many fiddly bits that need to be assembled. So here we're going to do a little bit of studio magic, and using a proper nerd receptacle, we are dumping all of the contents inside, including plastic bases, also some cork, also some goop in here, full bottle of that, stir as needed, and then say the magic word. Voila, just that easy. Now on to the muggle work. Adding a primer coat, and we're also adding 2 collars in addition to that primer, which will act as undercoat layers. And an undercoat layer is just a layer that we want to permeate through. One is from the bottom up, and in this case would be a purple, and then also a warm color from the top down. And because I know you'll ask, Internet, yes, the J.J. Abrams lens layer is absolutely necessary. Thank you for your inquiry. Now this box here you can see came with a lot more minis that I did not assemble because I just didn't want to. They were tedious. However, I like that I have all these extra, and there's a lot of weapons in here and tentacles that can be kit bashed for other projects down the road. One of the first things that we did once we moved from the airbrush table was to add some dry rust to all the metal. The metal armor is such a prominent piece on every one of these figures, so we wanted to start with a nice grimy layer underneath. We are learning a bunch of new software, a bunch of new equipment, and this right here was the moment that we discovered that the M50 camera likes to freeze after 30 minutes. The cork that we used for the base is going to use some wash, which is just a heavily watered down paint essentially, to add some texture. Using all of our skill and adeptness, we promptly put it right into the paint bin tray, which to our luck was dry. And nobody saw that, so hey, let's take some pictures. Needing a break, we decide to motivate ourselves by changing our poster out. So since these are going to be sea people, we wanted to do some sort of water effect with them, and I wanted to see how Mod Podge was going to work. We ended up not going that route, but anytime you get a chance to break out a huge bottle of Mod Podge, why don't you? Paint all the bases baby blue with the thoughts that something would probably be going over top of it that was clear, and sure how necessary it was in the end, but it didn't hurt. Recalling a previous encounter with our own clumsiness, we decided that we needed to put all of our minis on mini holders. A common practice is to use prescription bottles, and remembering some things we've learned on other channels on the internet, take this opportunity to weigh them down. Some gravel that we picked up at the local craft store. We had the goal to want to try to increase contrast on these miniatures. We're using washes on the tentacles to try to preserve a lot of that undercoat that we originally put on with the airbrush. The camera does not want to cooperate. And so I do what anybody should do when you encounter a situation like this. I go and play guitar. The rest of the paint job is going to be a series of adding some dry brushing, which will pull out the highlights, and then using washes, which generally will increase the shadows and also smooth out the shading transitions. Here in particular, you can see the dry brush really just starts to pick out that detail. Now, the water effect that we used was just a local craft store over the counter. I think we picked it up using a 50% coupon and, bought a bottle of it ended up for like about $4 or $5. I was pretty happy with how this worked. Next, we seal everything with a matte spray, trying to make sure that we spray level to the ground versus spraying high above like we did with the highlight level when we were doing our airbrushing. We want to do this level to the ground because we want to minimize the effect that the spray will have on the water. And in hindsight, we should have done the matte spray first and then do the water effect. However, actually spraying it this way did not seem to have much effect on the water, so we were happy about that. Final step that we do here is a dry brush on the rocks with a seafoam green. These rocks look like they're more from the water rather than, say, in a cave. And then although we had put some flocking on those bases before we had put in the water effects because we wanted someone to be submerged, we added the remaining flocking. And here we can see how our bargain bin miniatures turned out. Lots of character. You can see how all the combinations of techniques that we use, from the undercoating to the dry brushing to the washing and the rinsing and repeating of those steps, have really created a lot of depth and texture and subtle gradations in the shading and the shadowing. You can see how the undercoat permeates through, especially on some of the squid folks' bellies. Also, a thing of note is that we used gloss on different parts of the different models to give them a nice sheen. Also, really happy with how the contrast came out on these. This is an item that we have been continuously trying to focus on here in the studios, improving the contrast on our miniatures. Very happy with how the water effect ended up. Cork bases and how they turned out with the dry brush and the washes that were applied upon them. In addition, I think that the flocking adds a nice punch of color and is really appropriate for the water-based theme. If you feel that we were able to meet the goal of taking these Hadross Sea people from bargain bin to bomb-diggity, then give us a hashtag bomb-diggity in the comments. Being that we're a brand new studio, it really is a huge help to us if you can do all those things like clicking the like button and sharing the video, in addition to subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell notification icon. Let's try to listen to that and see what we got.